One of my favorite comedians are the people who try defining themselves as the incarnation of evil. The individual you see before you, named Peter, has quite the story to share. Another comedian who thinks he's singing the devil's tune. Oh, make no mistake, this guy has written quite a tale of terror during his days of being evil. Supposedly, Peter is a man who had mastered the art of human cruelty and suffering. To him, it's an art, a skill that he prides in, just enough to please and provide the Lord of Flesh with plenty of souls. And here we are, witnessing the conclusion of his sadistic quest, a pilgrim that should not be without his reward. Peter embarked on quite of a journey to be in this dark, dank room, his body chained and strapped against a contraption of metal, wood, nails, spikes, rusted shards penetrating and cutting into his flesh, like fresh cattle being prepped for the slaughtering. The smell of sweat, vanilla lingering in the air. Even the piss and feces beneath Peter's hanging carcass had brought a forbidden excitement for what's yet to come. I wonder if people will show pity for this man, or what's left of him, seeing him try to muster enough signals to push through the immense pain and proceed with the negotiation with his audience, the servants of Leviathan, the cenobites. For so many years, Peter anticipated this moment to prove his worth. But before we start shedding tears for Peter, I think it's best to hear his story, a reason why this man is to be rewarded immortality and to become one of them, a cenobite. If you knew where to hunt, the right victims to stalk, you'd be surprised how a city never fails on providing a fresh supply of lambs. Which explains why Peter would find himself riding the subway at night. Once in a while, he would find a woman riding alone, possibly going home after work. Just by looking at her, you can easily see the nervousness within her. Something about this night that seems different from the others. A danger that is lurking around the corner, a life-altering event that will never be forgotten. Peter always enjoyed the sight of his prey, hearing the silent prayers for a safe arrival. Always looking over their shoulder, too afraid to make any eye contact, terribly suspicious of everyone around them. Such vulnerable, easy prey. When they reached their destination, Peter would follow them as they rushed from the subway and into the urban jungle above. At that moment, he would call out to them with his thoughts, letting them know of his presence, exhilarating that fear, flooding their mind with such horrid possibilities at once, watching them slowly drown in terror. To let her know, at any given moment, Peter could easily take them, a connection that makes them feel helpless. But no, Peter would rather embrace the exquisite terror as he would close in the distance between himself and his prey. Fear, how they reek of it. A fragrance that aroused Peter. And as they smelled his aroma, as he could smell them, that is when Peter would make his move. A moment where Peter could see every nightmare they'd ever dreamed of replaying in their mind, having them obtain that full experience of terror in its purest form and forcing them to the ground, punishing them. It was essential to let them plead for mercy, to scream for help, to spill their whole life in a desperate attempt to achieve empathy from their attacker, wasting their final moments crying for help within a city that has no care. And at that very moment, when they would expect the worst, Peter would stop, fish for a wallet, any piece of identification, and read out loud their full names and addresses. At that moment, he will let them know they're not ready, and taking the identification with the promises of finishing what he started when the time is right. And as a creative touch to a work of art, Peter would leave whistling or singing something pleasant. Of course, such acts are not enough to gain Leviathan's favor. A lack of creativity, no imagination. Oh no, you see, that was only the beginning of Peter's work of art. Over the years, it was always the same act, stalking a vulnerable prey within the darkened streets, a violent assault that would come to a sudden stop and leaving with the promises of finishing the job later, setting a course that would give Peter's sadistic appetite far more than his fill. How Peter fed on the fear of his prey, drank in their torment, anguish, and deep slurping gulps, a true glutton of evil. The excitement Peter felt when knowing how he infected the minds of these women, those thoughts of him infesting their imaginations, hindering their way of thinking, socializing, robbing them from their trust in others, to pursue a normal life, to experience true happiness, depriving them from sleep so they don't have to experience the horrors of Peter coming back to finish what he started. Watching these women weep into something pitiful, helpless to their own minds. It was suffering that brought sadistic joy, how it made him smile, an art that brought him true happiness. But that wasn't the pinnacle of Peter's crusade. Oh no, Peter was far from finished with his prey. The years that followed, Peter played them like violins when leaving them voiceless messages from an unknown caller, having them experience the dread of feeling watched within their homes, blank letters in the mail that would give his victims a look into his darkened soul, never letting them forget, never letting the terror subside when knowing that there will come a day Peter will come back. A true artist indeed, a man who took great pride with his craft, explored different areas of suffering, a wall that held a vast collection of his proud achievements, photos of his victims, his camera capturing that perfect expression of fear on their faces, like butterflies pinned against his apartment wall, showing that perfect moment of how they always have to look over their shoulder. These precious victims who have lost that feeling of safety and security, so many years without peace and happiness. And even though most of his victims had tried moving on, tried to endure through the thoughts of Peter by moving states away, changing their names, going into hiding, and even tried reaching out to others for help with their useless survivor stories, only to find themselves facing that inevitable moment. It was not enough to escape Peter's cruelty. The fear was too great, and gradually, his victims would reach their breaking point. Many of them had tried taking control of their own fate by ending their own lives, as with the rest, left as broken human beings, rambling objects of flesh still waiting for a day that will never come. The overture is now complete, with the lemnit configuration in his possession, the final piece to Peter's grand masterpiece. He is but a single step from achieving immortality, for he had provided Leviathan a multitude of fodder souls, more than enough to prove his worth. And now here's Peter, chained before these cenobites, demanding his just reward. Well, here he is, a man who had reached the end of his journey and ready to reap the spoils of his hard work to please the Lord of Flesh behind those pale, emotionless expressions on the mutilated faces of his audience. Surely these servants of hell must find his story impressive. The story has merit. Any Cenobite will admit that it shows potential, except there is the concern and a lack of understanding with the philosophies that the Cenobites must abide and what truly drawn this man here. This story, the Cenobites must ask, is it pleasure and pain that brought Peter here? Or is he here to seek pleasure in the suffering of others? You see, Peter's story is very ancient. Throughout human history, there have been so many who have pursued the tales of the Cenobites, blindly offering themselves to the Lord of Flesh with rituals and even stories like Peter's, and to call upon the Cenobites and achieve the rewards for their loyalty and efforts. Even though very few have joined the order, many found themselves being misinformed during their studies and research. You see, the pleasure in having power over others is an experience that holds very little to no value within this realm, whereas the pleasure and pain and suffering itself holds endless opportunities in areas that are yet to be explored, something that far exceeds mankind's cruel appetite for the suffering of others. And this man, Peter, who's about to taste a pain that could never be experienced on Earth and will be legendary. In time, he will come to understand the ways of the Cenobite and how blind he was to the potential that was seen by the Lord of Flesh. It should bring enlightenment that the instruments being used to educate this pilgrim are creations from similar innovative minds who have chased the same goals of immortality. And as the crude construction maintained its course of shedding away Peter's identity of flesh, Peter wasting away his screams for the rightful reward that's owed to him. When will he become one of them, demanding his rightful reward to the Cenobites walking away? And the last thing Peter heard before they walked off. Perhaps later.